factions lie. The mainstream echoes a polished empty sound, but down in the basements the voices can be found. Yeah, Winnipeg alternative, a flickering light, cutting through the darkness, searching for what's right. On the prairies wide, the wind carries the seed of a truth that's growing, a different kind of creed. Yeah, Winnipeg alternative, a flickering light, cutting through the darkness, searching for what's right. On the prairies wide, the wind
Hello, everybody.
carries the seed of a truth that's growing, a different kind.
Welcome back to Winnipeg Alternative Media. Welcome back to the Prairie Truth.
Dusty website.
We have an incredible broadcast for you here tonight. And there is so much that we're not going to be able to get into here on the local front. In a moment, I will briefly touch on some of that. Oh my. Oh. If you're a Winnipegger right now, there's enough to be concerned about. But this broadcast is not about that. We are going to just touch on it briefly. All right, we'll shut down the intro music. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Prairie Truth. I am your host once again, of course, Todd McDougall. We've been doing this for 13 years. 13 years we've been doing this. Thanks for being with us. We have one of the best guests you could really possibly shake a stick at to be once again with us here tonight. We are blessed at being able to have guests like this on, and returning guests, such as the wonderful guest Leo Zagami that we have here tonight, the wonderful author. And the subject matter that we're going to get into tonight is dark. Yeah. This could have been a Halloween show, in a sense, because it is that kind of dark nature. But there's just there's so much awkward controversy that it's always wonderful to try to be able to take a shot right down the middle. And that's what we're attempting to do here tonight. And after I do play a quick little bit from, our wonderful sponsors and such, I do want to make a quick mention as to some of the important stories here happening in Winnipeg, because I don't know when I'll be able to get back on. Hopefully, it's going to be this week. I don't know if it's going to be Wednesday. I don't know if it's going to be Thursday. But there is an entire broadcast that needs to be done. Again, I feel like getting into it right now, but I have to kind of stop myself. Thanks for being with us here tonight. Please share this out, everybody. Share this one out. This is going to be so important. There is so many important things that are going to be discussed here tonight. But again, before we get into all of the rest, let's at least hear. Well, I'm going to make a quick little mention of some big Winnipeg topics that we're going to be touching on right away, just so you know that we have eyes on it. But let's hear from our wonderful sponsors here. Bulldog Demolition. You want any kind of demolition done, indoor, outdoor, commercial, residential, support citizen journalism and free speech. You want no other than.
Got a problem, walls are crumbling down. Concrete cracked the sorry side in town. Don't you fret, don't you despair. Bulldogs here, we know the care. Dust and rubble, that's our game. We build strong and make no shame. Call the bulldog, it's alright. We'll redecorate your life. From the ashes to the light. Building dreams all through the night. Nails and hammers in our hands. Crafty
And because of some of the incredibly important things happening in Winnipeg right now, I mean, we have businesses flooding almost, in a sense, out of Winnipeg right now because of arson and extortion. Arson and extortion. That's in your mainstream media, right? I'm not going to call up the clips. Go look it up for yourself. Again, we will be doing a special local news broadcast here this week. I don't have the time just yet, but just bear with me. We will be getting this together this week. Arson and extortion is taking over. Winnipeg business owners are getting phone called by people at random all the time saying, if you don't, okay, so that's Winnipeg right now. Never mind the Halloween display in Taché. People getting this fed up with politicians that they're doing Halloween displays that piss off the government so much that they're mentioning it in their own press conferences and such. And it's mainstream news. Not to mention something else I really wanted to get into. As we hear the province, as we hear the city of Winnipeg, the province of Manitoba, and the country of Canada all together try to go figure out what they want to go do with high-risk offenders. And yet, here's Winnipeg, here's Manitoba today. High-risk sex offender with the last name Mecredy is a high risk to once again offend. High risk to once again offend. To go sexually assault young women specifically. And at the same time as they say he's at high risk to offend again, they're telling you that they just put him back out on the streets. How does that make sense? How can you say the same two things in the same thought process? He's at high risk to offend, to go sexually assault other young women. And yet, but, well, the justice system has just found him okay to be back in the general public. The last name Mecredy, which I do believe is that's a name given to him. That's a French name. It's a day of the week. I do believe that was that. Is that Monday? I'm not sure. Yeah, but anyways, and I'm not calling all this up right now because that's not the point of this broadcast. We're going to get to that later this week. But I just wanted to make sure to go mention to everybody that yes, we're tracking these stories, and yes, it's unbelievable, and yes, it's disgusting. And based on that, I'm playing my last little promo, and then after this, it's all our guests. So if you want to go really, really know, understand, and dig into almost 7 days a week these incredibly important stories in a way that, of course, is free speech and wonderful citizen journalism, well, then it's Marty Gold, the Great Canadian Talk Show, and all the work that he does, even with the Winnipeg Sun as well, too. So we're running this promo, and then right after that, it's Leo Zagami all the way, everybody. We'll see you on the backside of just this one last little commercial. But again, though, of course, if you're a Winnipegger or a Manitoban and you don't know this platform that I'm about to run up a commercial for, you do really need to know it.
When you support the Great Canadian Talk Show, your donation makes sure that the investigations, the interviews, the fact-finding, the truth-telling can carry on. When you sponsor the Great Canadian Talk Show, you're telling the community that you think their stories matter. Our public affairs coverage continues to make a difference, challenging the slanted media narratives and giving a voice to the community. When you provide funding for the Great Canadian Talk Show, you're supporting old-fashioned investigative reporting that matters. Support TGCTS today.
All right, everybody. And with that now being finally all out of the way, let's bring on our guest for the evening, the wonderful returning guest, author, investigator, And oh gosh, very brave soul. Everybody, Leo Zagani.
Thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure, as you know, being here on Winnipeg Alternative Media. Is the evening for me unusual. I don't really give any interviews aside from you at this time. You know that.
Oh, don't start off by making me feel so pressured like that. How dare you? No, I'm kidding.
But it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. And of course, every time I'm here, I'm usually for a new book. So today's new book.
Oh gosh. And I'm sorry. You know what? I didn't mean to, at least, I'm sorry, everybody. I did mean to go flash this up on screen before we brought Leo on, and I will just do it quickly here right now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look at that. It fits perfectly between us. There we go. What an incredible image. I love the image. It was like you.
I must say that the graphic designer is it's top notch. He's actually a guy who has had direct experience also within the realm of secret society and Freemasonry. And he is a maestro, a teacher of art in his native Umbria region, which brought us some amazing art during the course of several centuries. So Vincenzo Viceversa is definitely the guy, and I know him since 1989. So he's one of my oldest friends.
Well, and it seemed like you had that was kind of like what you released just around Halloween as well too, which is
we planned it that way.
Of course, yes,
we planned it, and to tell you the truth, a series of synchronicities happened. Like there is also the new Frankenstein movie, which is out now, so we have also that added to the equation. And it is, of course, a moment of a great interest in regards to the Jeffrey Epstein saga and its story, which culminated with Prince Andrew, the now former Prince Andrew, losing all his titles. So we can say that definitely is coming out at the right time. It is also, as you can imagine, and Winnipeg Alternative Media has been always a place where I have presented some works of great controversy. But this one is no longer part of my Confessions of an Illuminati. This is now part of a new series of books, which I'm going to dedicate to single topics of interest, of course, connected to secret societies, geopolitics, religion. But I thought that to start with, I wanted to touch the Epstein case in a different way, completely different way, original way, no? So instead of relying on the information that will never be released to the full extent for obvious reasons, which I actually address in the introduction, which will compromise both the Republican as well as the Democrat Party, as well as the whole system of government that we have here in the United States of America. So I don't think we will ever have the full disclosure of this sad story. So this gives you already the answer when it comes to the eventual question: what about Trump? What about this? What about that guy? Now, when it comes to Trump, I want to immediately say that his name, of course, surfaces maybe 3 times in the course of this book, but we have never really found any criminal activity associated to Trump in this case. The problem is, of course, the connections that Trump might have, and a very influential banking cartel and a system that is behind and was behind Jeffrey Epstein and is still behind the United States of America, which is a system that you can't bring it down without bringing down the whole of Washington, D.C. So this is really the relevance of this book. It brings you the ancestry, the religious, political, anthropological background of Jeffrey Epstein in a way to demonstrate also his role was way beyond what we imagine as simply the pedophile or the guy who had the human traffic ring to then do blackmail. No, it's a little bit more complex than that. And
well, hold on one second. I'd like to just ask my first kind of question here. If I could.
yeah.
Now, is this because of the way that I kind of have an understanding in it that was sort of, what is considered, the shadow government, right? In a sense, the globalists or whatever that might be. Is it because, what is really there in the name of a sex trafficking ring or in pedophilia, were that sort of lust, and whatever it has to do with wanting that is almost more important than almost anything else. When you're, of course, when money doesn't mean anything anymore. Money,
but
land ownership.
There is something more. There is something more. You see, when I show, for example, on the cover of the book, this the temple on top of the temple on top of Little St. James, which nowadays is being repainted in white, but this was the original colors. It's not simply a temple. It's a temple based on a place which I show here in Aleppo. You see, they are basically one based on the other. And this is an historical place of relevance because it was a meeting place for centuries of the Sabbatians or the Sabbatian Frankists later. And this sect within Judaism represents the elite that controls the rest of Judaism, but not only Judaism. They have infiltrated Christianity, Islam, and they have also been the heads of the banking cartel of the New World Order. Like, in the past, I have exposed the Jesuits.
How does this reference to the Talmud?
Sorry?
The Talmud.
The Talmud?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, the Talmud is a commentary, so we should refer to the Torah, which are the 5 sacred books, which we call the Old Testament, which is the Pentateuch. In reality, the Talmud is a commentary, and that's why it creates a lot of let's say misunderstanding within people who are not familiar with it. Because of the Talmud, you have different versions depending on who is the source of this commentary. So you see, it's a central text of rabbinic Judaism, but at the same time is also a source of primal controversy when you have maybe one guy who comments on Jesus in the most obscene way possible, or the Talmud instead being also at the center, for example, of controversies that are, of course, of a religious nature. But in reality, when we're talking about the Talmud, we talk about the Mishnah, which is also the written collection of the Jewish traditions that are known as the Oral Torah, which, of course, is the statutes and legal interpretations that were not recorded in the 5 books. Then we have the 613 laws, which are the Mosaic laws, which are the ones that today, unfortunately, because of the Sabbatian Frankist infiltration, there is a little bit like all these branches of Judaism who cherry pick which laws they like to obey to. And I'm sure that if Moses came down to the mountain now and found what's happened in Judaism, he would be like, what the heck is going on? Because nobody's really respecting the very first tenets of the Sinaitic Mosaic laws, which are basically the 10 Commandments. And there is a lot of the 10 Commandments that is not respected today by mainstream Judaism. So I think that the thing is, when it comes down to the Torah, because the new interpretation given by the Sabbatian Frankists was, of course, not written also, and it's supposed to be the real Torah, then that becomes even more a subject of controversy. And in my book, I explain how you had 2 people who came along, actually 3. One was Shabbatai Zevi, the other one was Baruch Rus, and the other one was Jacob Frank. Now, these people were false prophets, as a Christian will see them, no? False prophets. The Jews never accepted Jesus. So when these people came along, they thought that they were the messiahs, each one in their own period. Sabbatai Zevi came in the 17th century, and then you have immediately after Baroque Rus until the early 18th century, and then you had, of course, Sabbatai Zevi. Jacob Frank. And what happened is that these people claimed they were messiahs for the Jews, but they were not really following Judaism. They created their own sick, interested interpretation in which they were doing everything opposing the laws of the Jews, so they could get through this so-called redemption through sin, this immerging themselves into sin, closer to the Messianic era. And that happened with these people doing things like eating pork on holy days, which of course you can imagine, not even in non-holy days, the Jews should eat pork. Then you had orgies that were wife swapping that became almost a practice, obligatory practice for these heretics. All kinds of things that, of course, for classical Judaism were shocking. And that is also what led later on to the birth of the Orthodox Jews, the ones that we see now, the Hasidic, with all their funny hairstyle and the hats and all the things, no? Because they were almost like viewing this heresy as an insult to Judaism. And so they wanted to go back to a more traditional interpretation. All goes back, of course, though, to these false messiahs like Sabbatai Zevi, who was born himself in
hold on. Where in this history did the doors start to become spread wide open? Never mind.
1666. 1666.
No. But where did they start to get spread wide open to this incredible lie that it also belonged to the Catholic Church as well too?
Sure.
I don't know how much it belongs to modern day Christianity, but certainly to old, to kind of some old versions of Judaism, and certainly to Catholicism. This pedophilia, this sex trafficking.
Yeah, in fact,
this is what we're really here for tonight.
Yeah.
Eventually, along these histories that we're talking about, these doors get kicked wide open.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't say maybe kicked wide open, but they're opened, and then they're well, that's the topic of discussion. And then, of course, they're hidden. But
okay,
they become almost like important offshoots of the belief itself.
Yes.
Like it's allowed to exist, and it's very well known widely throughout. And it's just like it's as much as important of a part of the belief as anything else. It doesn't really matter how much it's hidden. It's right in there through and through.
I would say
where does this really get us into that part of the story?
I give you the timeline.
Where does this come from?
The timeline that maybe can be briefly closer to us, but then we should go even far back in history, because if we start with the generation of the Jewish religion, it starts already when Moses goes up the mountain and those people are worshipping the golden calf because they were inspired by magicians who were operating in the house of the Pharaoh, who decided to follow the Jews outside of Egypt. And so that already was, it's called the Erev Rav, and it's already a degeneration, let's say. But when it comes to Sabbatai Zevi, he was born in 1626, and Jacob Frank will be born exactly a century later. In these branches of Judaism, they believe in reincarnation. So reincarnation also has a very important element to this story. And what happens
hold on, just by the way, everybody, just for the next few minutes, and of course I'll be right here. I just want to just make sure to mention to everybody that I'm going to just put you up on screen for a moment, everybody, because I don't know how many options you get to hear this man anymore, and I really want to make sure there's as many options as possible. These are, the well-researched, well-learned words of Leo Zagami. Everybody, please share this out. Leo, you have.
Okay. Now, in my book, I explain how already in the 15th, 16th century, you were starting to have this idea, which was conjured by both the Puritans, who were, of course, a breakup from the Church of England, who wanted to go in an even more puristic approach, and the Jews who were let back into England at the time of Oliver Cromwell. Now, this, without complicating too much the matter for the people who are following us, anyway, it was at that time that the whole idea of going back to Israel was kind of put together. And the father of Shabbatai Zevi, this guy Mordecai Zevi, was working in today's Turkey, in Smyrna, which today is called Izmir, and it's located in the coast of Anatolia. Smyrna basically became the center for this heresy when it came along. It was an ancient Greek city before that, and now it's the modern city of Izmir. So this Jewish guy, Mordecai Zevi, was working for the English people who were very much connecting with the Jews along this idea of bringing the English, wanted to first bring the Jews back to England because they had been kicked out several centuries earlier, and then after that bring them back to Israel. So this is the very basis of the whole thing that then centuries later will manifest full on in the Zionist movement. So it wasn't only a product of Judaism, but it was also a product of Christians who thought that the only way of manifesting the scriptures is to bring the Jews back to the Holy Land. Otherwise, we will not have the return of the Messiah. So now, in regards to what happened with the beginning of this tragedy that went through Shabbatai Zevi, then, of course, Shabbatai Zevi started to create this heresy, this sexual magic, these deviant practices, all kinds of perversions. The more it was perverted, the better it was. Then he was forced by the Sultan in 1666, which is a very important date, to publicly convert to Islam, and so did part of his followers, not all of them. And then later on, after his death, we had another guy claiming he was his reincarnation, who lasted briefly, called Baruch Russo. And then we have Jacob Frank, whose family arrived in Thessaloniki, which was then part of the Ottoman Empire, at a young age, because his uncle was suspected of being a Sabbatian. This heresy within Judaism is very important, because the sexual magical practices, the Kabbalistic practices, in a deviant way, not respectful of the original Lurianic or the original Kabbalah, it's the basis for then Eliphas Levi, who promoted at least the word occult, for Aleister Crowley later on, who was initiated and then became part of the OTO, which was itself a product of the Sabbatian Frankist through the Asiatic bread. So basically, modern Satanism comes from this. That's the question you answered me earlier. So where is that moment in which all this is born? I would say that the turning point was the beginning of it all, when Shabbatai Zevi in 1666 declared himself to be Muslim, and at the same time completed and conducted secret rituals. So he will continue this descend into what he claimed would be sin, to then claim the sparkles of some kind of God, transmission from God. I mean, it's a very sick and twisted way of seeing things, but at the practical level, this sect became very important for people like the Rothschild, for the main banking families in Frankfurt. And my book explains how the people in Eastern Europe, who are the ancestors of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, were concocted in this sect, which then deviates from the traditional Judaism and the Mosaic laws, and gradually gives birth to all kinds of ideologies as well as branches of Judaism. One of the most known is communism, which is picked up in part by the Jesuits, but then becomes also, through Karl Marx, the manifesto of the communists. It becomes the basis for this new diabolic ideology. So I think that we have here defined a little bit the whole thing. I mean, we have Sabbatian Kabbalistic teachings, Kabbalistic writings that in a way had been inspirational. And in my book, I also, of course, talk about the history of the golem. And the golem is the one that also, together with Jacob Frank, inspired later Frankenstein, the Frankenstein tale. So we have now a bunch of Frankenstein movies, and it's of course a scary season. Everybody, remembers that famous phrase from one of the early Frankenstein versions: "It's alive! It's alive!" Now it's Jeffrey Epstein. It's alive in the sense that he was created by these people behind him, which I describe one by one. He just didn't come out of nowhere. And that is the missing link that this book gives you. How did Jeffrey Epstein get to become Jeffrey Epstein? From the middle of the 70s, from when he was taken into the Dalton School, this very preppy, exclusive elite school, without even having a degree at the university, becomes professor of math and science. I mean, people already, and the guy who gave him the job is Donald Barr, the father of the future William Barr. And Donald Barr, in my book, I explain he wasn't a Catholic. He wasn't born Catholic. He became a Catholic, but he was a Sabbatian Frankist. He was Jewish, who came from the Sabbatian Frankist heresy areas. And so it's all connected. Lex Wexner, in the middle of the 80s, gives him this big building in the center of New York, rigged with cameras, with this, with that, and then says, "You are the head of this aspiring and you work for us." But who were the people who were with Lex Wexner? That, of course, is part also of the book. So as you see, it's very interesting, the revelations I make.
Take us through some details. I mean, we don't want to go through too much because we want people to get the book and read the book.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, now that you've gone through everything leading us up to what the book is going to fully explore, okay, let's go through a couple just key elements. All right. What brought him into prominence with Hollywood? And and that allowance between the political world and Hollywood to move between the two so fluidly, what brings that to life, and what keeps that working so clandestine?
Because there was a group of very influential Sabbatian Frankists who will also be known as the Mega Group. The Mega Group is something that Lex Wexner created in the early 90s. And there was people who are very influential, like Ronald Lauder, for example, or there was connections with people like Roy Cohn, who is very close to Donald Trump. But we have connections with the elite of the B'nai Brit. The B'nai Brit is this form of Jewish Freemasonry that was born out of the necessity of these Jewish German immigrants who couldn't join Freemasonry when they arrived in America, simply because in Germany, aside from the Asiatic Brethren, which I mentioned, which became this group filled with Sabbatian Frankists, who then was linked to the German aristocracy. So they carried on they opened for the first time the lodges of Freemasonry in Germany for the Jews. But it was only one order. Most of Freemasonry never accepted them.
And B'nai B'rith is something that takes in like massive donations across Canada. Like they're a massive organization.
Absolutely, they are very strong in Toronto.
They're huge. They're just like a Shalom. Many Jewish organizations, and of course, very much like in the political arena, that always dresses itself as taking care of people, right? Wanting to do its best to try to go help people. But will often be found out for having all these other different areas.
Well, that is really what this book, explains that other books don't explain. You see, I hear very much these days people talking about IPAC and the influence that IPAC has over American politics. I don't know if you have followed this whole thing, but IPAC is basically...
Well, same that you could say that OPEC has.
No, IPAC is the American Israel Public Affairs.
No, I know. I'm just drawing a line. OPEC, OPEC also, tons of political influence. Yes.
Of course. And I would say maybe today even more than OPEC, because OPEC...
and you're probably correct.
Now, but IPAC is actually the people who control IPAC, are the people who were employing Jeffrey Epstein. And it was the elite of the B'nai B'rith International who then created a Illuminati group known as the Mega Group, which Steven Spielberg was part of. So here you see there is already one connection with Hollywood. Plus you have all the lodges of the B'nai B'rith in Hollywood. Plus you have the finance lodge of the B'nai B'rith. Now the B'nai B'rith was born in 1843, and it was initially called the Bundesbrüder because they were German, and it was called the League of Brothers. Then they only spoke German and Yiddish when they created it. Later on, they created the whole thing in a Masonic temple after, with the rituals that were kind of Masonic, regalia, which was, they wanted to feel like Masons, but they were not Masons, so they had to make something very similar. And the influence, though, of the Sabbatian Frankist was pretty obvious, because if you interpret the real meaning of the of B'nai B'rith, it comes out as the Sabbatians utilize this atbash in amulets and also in certain esoteric secrets. Sabbatai's name itself was cryptically written Babei Tai, and the first letter of his name, Shin, was substituted with the bet. So basically, just to cut the long story short so you can get the rest of my book, B'nai B'rith means Shabbatai is my illumination. They are Sabbatian Frankists to the core, because they actually state on their name the Sabbatai is their illumination, not Moses, not Jesus, but the false prophet Shabbatai Zevi. That's why it's so important. And
give me a spelling. Give me a spelling for that. I'd like to take that in.
The spelling of what? Of the way they...
Shabbat, no, what you were just saying there.
Okay, the Atbash is the Sabbatian utilize the Atbash in amulets. It is cryptically, the Sabbatai's name was known as Babetai, which is like this. Let's see if I can put it on your thing here, Babetai. And then, of course, you have the first letter of his name, Shin, was substituted with the bet. And of course, now, like I said, it's a bit complex to give you the whole explanation, but the actual hidden message, the hidden meaning of B'nai B'rith is Sabbatian enlightenment. The term B'nai B'rith does occur in the Mishnah in Judaic literature, but it is in reality connected to the Hebrew letters that are referenced cryptically, secretly to the Sabbatians. And we know that the B'nai B'rith was founded because simply in Germany, they will not let them in the Masonic orders. However, a lot of those people who founded here in America, the B'nai B'rith here in America, had already, at least the Americans who joined immediately the B'nai B'rith had already joined the Masonic orders, the Odd Fellows, because here there was not the restrictions you had in Germany. But what happened was that by creating the B'nai B'rith, then they could bring back this organization in Germany at the end of the 19th century, and it became extremely popular. In the meantime, the Jews had bypassed the limitations given by the Prussian lodges and had asked to regularize their position, at least one lodge in Frankfurt. It was very important, directly to the Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England. So they became connected directly with the United Grey Lodge of England, because there is always a big, strong link between the Sabbatian Frankists and the royal family in England and the Great Britain. You have to understand that the Rothschild family became nobilitated in England and then became mixed with the local aristocrats and royals, because they started to marry with Jacob Frank said at one point, you can only marry the members of the sect. But when the rabbinical community, as well as the Christian authorities, were investigating them, then the Frankists decided to marry out, to marry into the Catholic world, even if they had converted to the Catholic world and they had stayed only between each other. But the trick was, when you married into a Christian family, or when you were baptized, to get their surname of the guy who baptized you. So you will become more and more integrated, and people will have difficulty in detect that you were a Jewish person, because at that point you were using a Christian surname. So there was all this way of deceiving and infiltrating themselves, which led them to infiltrate great part of the nobility in Europe as well as in England. When they eventually started to marry also with the nobility in England, they didn't care at that point to maintain their their Jewish appeal, because they were Sabbatian Frankists. So for them, even if outwards they were preaching themselves to be Christian, or they were claiming themselves to be Christian, they could still practice in secret their heretical Jewish practices. The ones who stayed within Judaism, though, they became even more insidious, because they were the ones who converted to Christianity, and, in order to, let's say, advance in society and maybe become, for example, like happened, I remember in Norway, there was one Grand Master, because there in Norway, Freemasonry is strictly for Christians. The Swedish Rite, which they practice, is strictly for Christians. So what did they do? They simply converted outwards to the Christian faith, and then they could become Grand Master of Freemasonry. So in a Christian country where Freemasonry was Christian, which is not something common. In most countries, Freemasonry is open to all faiths. Anyway, like I said, the banking cartel was established around Jacob Frank, in particular in Frankfurt.
Okay, and we've covered that, and we can cover that more at a different. We only have so much time right now.
Sure.
So we're going to go.
And like I said, modern Satanism, if we go all the way to Anton LaVey himself, Anton LaVey was himself a descendant of the Sabbatian Frankists. His real name was Anton Levi, and so there is, like I describe it in my book, a dark stream that goes from Shabbatai Zevi and his revelation of a new millennium in 1666, in fact 666, all the way to Anton LaVey, who in 1966 proclaimed the birth of the Church of Satan. It's one dark stream, and one of the maximum exponents of the Church of Satan. Who is it?
And what you've done in length tonight is basically to explain the continuation, the evolution of the bastardization of any sort of real spiritual belief. I would say that is. Yeah. And of course the way that it's viewed, in sort of like the mainstream, or what it's supposed to be, or actually the bastardization of what its actual real true belief system and real origins are supposed to be, is what you've once again so beautifully pointed out. But let's go bring that down to a pinpoint as best as possible. With all of that being said, does this idea of preying on the youth, of preying on innocence, this demonic practice that seems to go across very clear, and of course as Satanism and as Luciferianism would prove to want to do. As it also talks about wanting to, of course, level all world, spiritual religions into just a nothingness, right? To make it all atheism, a zero in a sense, which we see in the political.
That
version.
was, if you think about
and the political version of that is communism, in a sense, melt everything together,
absolutely,
and just have it being held by the high priest. And that is Satanism. That's why Luciferianism is Satanism, communism. They all shake hands, 100%, for a reason. They belong together. They always have. They're born from the same. Their implication to want to have heavily involved in them this strong sensibility that they've now used, sort of LGBTQ and so on and so forth. These other, just sort of disastrous. No, I want to pull back a little from that. This obvious marching on changing of the guard in just general human sexuality, human family, human understanding of what it is to be human and move forward in this life, and know what it's like to be a part of this species and what carries it forward. They're sort of raping. They're completely just wanting to go change the game on all of that, and how that feeds into this Epstein thing and everything you just explained. Where and how does that become a pinnacle of what what this means?
Okay, like I described in a specific chapter of this book, there has been, and currently we are in the 5th major ritual of humanity. So there has been, before that, 4 major rituals. And I briefly explain what, of course, you can then read in my book, because it's very important, and I think your question is very much due for a better understanding, a much more in-depth understanding of my book. Now, the first major ritual was celebrated at the dawn of humanity, and in that moment, the early form of what we call the elite was implanting a sort of ternary algorithm in our minds. And we have at that point the sales process involving a freeway division of the decision-making process. And at that point, we started to have a perception of reality that was different.
So it seems like you're touching on it right there. Like it's a clear path to destroy the mind. Right?
No, but I tell you just briefly.
Fracture all proper thought.
Yeah, but it's more complex than that, because yes, it's destroyed. But we had the second major ritual, which was performed during the end of the Paleolithic, and we had the further regression in our ability to detach ourselves from the objective reality. Then you had they have the third ritual, which is but in the end, the 5th ritual, which is still in the making, is the one that Jeffrey Epstein was also working actively technologically
there
for.
We go. I was going to say, let's bring it back down to your book.
Which is basically arriving to the level, and still I don't think that technologically we are at that level, but they have tried to arrive to that level, and that's where they want to get. It is the 5th major ritual the Illuminati elite wants to take, is to upload the minds of all human beings and upload them in a digital simulation. That's it. But before getting to that level, in my book, I explain all the other 4 major rituals.
Does using some of what they're doing and using some of the way they just played on humanity about it, with how easily they can just go ahead and find youth and whatever to pick on, and the fact that they're doing in so many other ways that are just amounting to the same thing, with flooding, different aspects of the Western world.
Okay, I would say this.
Hold on, and also the AI thing and social media.
Sure.
Is it all really? How much of it is geared to want to go pick on, rape away, and almost like just like offer up as prey, almost like this larger than life satanic ritual, to offer up like the youth and the innocence to as some sort of like consistent offering.
Well, let's say this, that when it comes to the fourth ritual, the major ritual that started at the time in which we also had the birth, let's say, of speculative Freemasonry, then of course later on modern Satanism, the Illuminati also, and all that. Let's say that in all that element, all the way from the birth of the Sabbatian Frankist heresy, we have this element of sexual magic that is not necessarily present in the next following level.
Rasputin and many others.
At this level, once it's concluded, and once we, in theory, upload a human experiences like we are doing by the social networks of choice that we are using, that are absorbed by the AI, then at that point, we as human beings are no longer, let's say, we are occupying space, and we are, at that point, can be eliminated, because our own experience has been already transferred in the virtual context, which is the context that they can easily control. And at that point, of course, they want to eliminate the 3/4 of humanity, like it was stated in the Georgia Guidestones, or even more. So then they will never have more than 500 million people, while instead today we are many more. So their intention is to upload themselves also to make themselves immortal. Now, this is very important concept for them, immortality.
Is there something about what they have to go steal away from youth and children and other people?
And they don't care about youth, children, anything. If they cared about
so all of that, and which are part of what your new book is about, is that sort of just like pleasure along the way? Does it really mean anything to them?
It's still
like it's kind of like vampiric sucking energy, right?
No, but it's still part of the fourth major ritual, is absorbing that energy which they need, and which it was part of a very defining moment, because for them that energy was all aimed into materializing what we have now with the AI and robotics.
With the Epstein thing getting to where it got already in mainstream understanding.
Yeah, but think about Jeffrey Epstein.
Does it scare any of them whatsoever? Does it seem like that story broke some other new ground, or does it matter at all?
No, absolutely.
Okay, so what do you feel about, like, being a big backer of Trump?
I feel like
where does the whole Trump Republican American thing rely on? And I know this is a very small part of the conversation. I know very well. I want to make sure to make note of this right now. This is a very small part of this conversation. Is this really part of? I just want to make sure to ask it, because people are going to bug me if I don't.
Sure.
What do you feel about that whole side of things? And I know it's a very minute part of the conversation.
I feel like I said, anybody who goes even close to the White House.
Did Trump fail you?
It fails everybody the moment in which, unfortunately, with the executive part of you have the legislative branch here in America, you have the judiciary, and you have the executive branch. But when you go into the executive branch for the second time, inevitably they will come and knock on your door and say, you can do this, you cannot do this, you can do this, you cannot do this. Basically, at that point, you realize that your life is in danger, first of all. And at the same
time, have you heard anything from the inside about that kind of, being a reality?
Definitely, you have to understand that in this book I explain very well, and you
go into that even too.
You can deduct
how the whole court case came to be. I get, of course.
No, you can deduct that basically he might have, like I said, the testimonies are obviously always been in favor, even Virginia Giuffre's testimony, that Trump has never conducted himself in a criminal manner. But the problem is that Trump himself is surrounded by people who are compromised, and if they go down, he goes down, everybody goes down, because
because it's as easy as saying, well, you befriended me, so you're just as bad as I am.
No, it's not. I mean, it's a question that if all the people who finance the people in Washington, D.C. are compromised, and the moment in which you expose a certain thing, you risk to bring down yourself too. So that is really here the essence of the compromise. And when you say, why are they such predators? Why they are fixated with sex? It is about the energy that they wanted to acquire, a little bit like Silvio Berlusconi back in his heyday with the Bunga Bunga, the late Italian prime minister, who himself also wanted to drag this energy out of the minors.
By the way, everybody, I just love hearing Leo say the Bunga Bunga. That's
yeah, which was this sort of ritual that he devised based on probably a practice that was inspired by Muammar Gaddafi. But in any case, the thing is that all these people who arrive to a certain level is not because they're simply bored, but because they want to achieve also immortality, and they want to have this constant energy, that flows in them, that comes from the youth. It's like being vampires almost of this energy, no? And so Frankenstein is in the cover, but we have also that Dracula element, which we could maybe, I discussed in other books, the vampirism element.
Okay, I gotta ask this now. Epstein is now in the past. There's no way of not, and I you know what, as I'm about to say the words, I'm already imagining you answering, saying like, oh, that's my, I can already imagine what's going to happen after I say this, and so I think it's now perfect that I say it. Epstein's not the last. There's got to be more, right? And this thing still continues. Have you written about that? And do you have a shakedown or anything on the fact, okay, so now there's the Jeffrey Epstein thing, and it got into the public eye for whatever reason, maybe because it was meant to, hey, we'll burn this one and make it look like we're now all, there's so many different ways that kind of can play out. But regardless of wanting to go figure that out right now, Epstein's not the only one now, is he? And is there more?
You see, I went inside the black books of Jeffrey Epstein. I have the unredacted versions, so I could access to their phone numbers, every single detail. And
you just sit there wearing a nice suit like that right now. My gosh, good for you. You are the bravest man I know, man. Seriously.
Now, this guy here was guested in the Oval Office in May with the Juventus football team. His name is John Elkann. John Elkann is also one of the heads of the Meta board of Facebook. John Elkann is the head of Ferrari, Fiat, Chrysler, and every Stellantis automobile maker, and he's the head of the.
So he can be an Epstein even worse then.
In the Epstein book, you had one of his direct relatives, this other guy, but Elkann comes from a family that goes back hundreds of years in Frankfurt, in Worms, in Germany. Family of important and leading Sabbatian rabbis, and they took over literally the Agnelli family in Italy by marrying inside them, and then mysteriously they all died, the Agnelli part of the family, and John became the guy who inherited this guy's position. Now, this guy's position, this one was the most influential Bilderberger, best friend of Henry Kissinger, and lover of Jackie Onassis, Gianni Agnelli. And this was his his mother was the sister of this gentleman here. Once the Elkanns mixed up in the family, like I explained in this book, suddenly his son dies, his other nephew dies, they all die, and so the Agnelli part of the family gets decimated in mysterious deaths. And they take control of the whole thing, which becomes then Stellantis. and they are the major automobile makers on the world today, one of the major automobile makers in the world. And he's the chairman, of course, of Ferrari, amongst other things. But aside from that, we have in my book also, of course, the future of the Sabbatian Frankist, because I explain all their contacts with the banking system, all the representatives.
Like who's the next Jeffrey Epstein? Like who's doing it now? Who would be like the next that would be sort of like that sort of they're the best one, the suave, the connoisseur, the guy. There's got to be a lot of them.
Today,
is there somebody who's easy to pinpoint?
Today, I think, first of all, we have to understand Jeffrey Epstein was not only Jeffrey Epstein, the guy who provided the young ladies for the elite. Jeffrey Epstein was like Dr. Frankenstein. He was a major force within science and mathematics. He was connected with Harvard University. He was connected with
he was involved in arms dealing.
He was involved with Peter Thiel from Palantir, whose family comes from Frankfurt and has been historically linked to the Sabbatians, even if he's not Jewish. We have links to many other people, from Elon Musk to anybody who is of relevance. So I would say that today, because of the nature of the internet and the AI, Jeffrey Epstein is maybe a figure that, I don't know if it's dated, and maybe now something else.
Who's the name right now that you would give the same sort of like figurehead to?
No, I will not say that there is a name that I would say plays a similar role, because probably there is several people who have similar roles, but they are not present in the public eye, because they have already learned from the Jeffrey Epstein scandals what errors not to conduct. And I think that today probably the technology side of things, the way the AI works, the way you can procure yourself instantly dozens of profiles of minors, and then suddenly start act as predators through the AI, means that maybe in the future you don't even need a Jeffrey Epstein. You will have directly an AI Epstein kind of guy.
Sure.
You understand? However, we can say that the elite will continue to do what they're doing in places like Dubai, for example, where they don't have any possibility of getting out alive with any information, because if you are the elite in Dubai, you can do whatever you want.
What would you suggest to parents here in Canada and North America about having their children anywhere around social media?
First of all, they have to be very careful, and especially if they start getting invited in places like Dubai or the Emirates in general, places where there is the possibility that they will be enslaved and human trafficked without any repercussions for them. Because, you can go to the Canadian government and tell your daughter is in Dubai, and they will say, okay, they don't have an extradition, we can't do anything, and that's it. That's why in the future, for example, Prince Andrew, who was defined by Jeffrey Epstein as being an even bigger pervert than himself, this is the words used by Jeffrey Epstein, is probably moving to the Emirates before he gets arrested.
Yeah.
So okay. I think this is what is going to happen. We're going to have these areas where there's no possibility for us to access. You see, Jeffrey Epstein was still mingling within countries in which there is, of course, the rule of law, at least in place, theoretically, even if then we have seen that the rule of law doesn't apply to the people connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Because if only Jeffrey Epstein, Jean-Luc Brunel, and Ghislaine Maxwell got to actually go in prison, that means that a bunch of people got away with it. And that means, first of all, the failure of our own legal system.
Oh, 110%. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Now, before just letting you close on everywhere to go find your book and everything else, I wanted to ask you one last question.
Yes.
A lot of what you've just gone over, and a lot of why I know your book that you're about to kind of like, give a last little, big, promo to, and let everybody know where to get it. You've been involved in so much controversial stuff. You've had to go through all different versions of legalities, court dealings, running, hiding. I don't want to say that in a negative way. I just mean having to go, self-preservation. You've had to go through lots of different versions of self-preservation in and out of courts of law. And so for you to come forward with a book like this is not just brave, but oh my gosh, ballsy.
Well, yes, I mean,
I love it to death. So I wanted to just go say it like this. Now, did something, because this has been happening kind of across the board in the last 2 months. Was there anything, maybe that had to do with watching what happened to Charlie Kirk, sort of push you a little more in the direction of like, well, I gotta continue, to go hard?
Yes, because that was a pivotal moment. I was 3/4 through laying this book down in a way that, of course, was bold and courageous on my side. But when I saw what happened to poor Charlie Kirk, who I wanted to actually go and visit this year, Turning Point, because I have a dear friend in common who invited me over and over again. I said, okay, I'm going to make it this year. Well, then unfortunately, next year. But unfortunately, it didn't happen and it will never happen. So I think it gave me that extra courage, that to give that extra mile of information in the book, which maybe I wouldn't have given before. Because, when you see the courage of a guy who gives his own life for an ideal, like Charlie Kirk, then I, of course, as you know, I've been the subject of persecution, but and they also tried to poison me, by the way. So I know what it means, an attempted assassination. But to actually see somebody like Charlie Kirk being assassinated, and then all these mysteries surrounding the death and the actual assassin and the guy associated with the assassin, who's now.
Let me ask you quickly about that. What do you think? About all
I think that is definitely, there's a lot of points that we will probably never clear, just like we're still discussing the Kennedy assassination after all these decades. So, for me to state this or that is simply speculation, but definitely there's a lot of points that are not clear. And I think that it came in a critical moment in the history of the United States, his assassination. He was also in the last few months starting to get a little bit probably on the nerves of certain elements who wanted to buy him out also from Israel. Now, like I explain in my book, Israel is a Sabbatian state, and both sides of the of Israel politics are somehow played, because it's in a Sabbatian state created by the Sabbatian Frankist sect. Everything is contacted, and unfortunately the first victims are the Jewish people, the Jewish communities around the world who are suffering anti-Semitism, as well as the people of Israel who are brought for a ride by these people over and over again.
Brought on by their own.
And for that reason, my book wants to be not only dedicated to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, that is, of course, my dedication, but it's also a book where anti-Semitism is discussed as a negative subject, and where, I stress over and over again, these things that you are, now learning of are an ideology and a religion. They're not a race. We never have to blame a race of people for something. That is racism. We are criticizing an ideology, a sectarian movement, eventually some parts of this religion which have gone rogue. Racism is not in my blood, and we should always be critical of racism, because after what happened in the Holocaust, that can never happen again. So thank you so much for having me on, and God bless you all, as usual.
That
Until
was
the
the best
next
way to do it.
time.
Leo, thank you so much. I cannot wait to have you back on again. I know we will have you back on again sooner than later. Leo, God bless you as well too. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. Oh,
And this,
God.
you know,
Tell everybody where to get the book. Where do we get the book, Leo?
the book you can get on Amazon.com and on leozagami.com together with my latest articles. Here you have also the Pope John Paul II giving his blessings to Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and that, of course, is all explained in this book. Thank you so much for having me on Winnipeg Alternative Media. Until the next time, God bless you all.
There we go, everybody. There goes our wonderful guest for tonight, Leo Zagami, back again once with us to discuss much more than just Jeffrey Epstein, but the shadow government, things happening around the world, things happening between some of the world religions. Oh, gosh. We could go on and on and on. And that is the wonderment of being able to do something like this. I mean, I myself am still reeling a little bit on what I just listened to. And that's I'm a fan of this show. This is the same as I'm the host. Okay? I'm a fan just as much as I'm the host. That's why I love doing this. You think I have Leo on just because I get to know him? You think I went out to coffee with him all the time? We don't even live in the same country. I get to talk to him occasionally. But to be able to have him on and do this, see, I'm a fan of doing that just as much as I am here. You think I'm just hosting? No, I'm not. I'm taking it all in just as much as you all are. You have no idea. And that's supposed to be a beauty of this. It's raw like that. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thank you. All the people on YouTube now. We're going to get our YouTube back soon, maybe. There's people watching on YouTube right now because of Leo. All right, everybody. Please help support independent journalism and free speech, citizen journalism. There's a simple e-transfer to winnipegaltmedia@gmail.com. It's a simple e-transfer to winnipegaltmedia@gmail.com. And you support everything that we are doing here. A wonderful shout out to our big sponsors at Bulldog Demolition. We have a huge Grey Cup party coming up. A huge Grey Cup party coming up that we're a part of. Yeah, the Manitoba Unhinged Grey Cup party. Manitoba 16th, Diablo. I'm only going to say that right now. We'll have more about that in the near future. If you're watching on Facebook, don't. Join us on Rumble. You can find us on Telegram at t.me/whamchat. Everywhere social media, basically. And X, Instagram, Rumble. Just go search up at WPG Media. It's at WPG. Find us everywhere at WPG Media, okay? Find us everywhere at WPG Media. You can email us at WPGmedia@protonmail.com as well, too. Your love letters, your breakup notes, your insults, your questions, your commentary, your jokes, your desire to want to be able, to get pictures of my naked feet. I know a lot of people have been wanting that, and I haven't given out any yet, but soon enough we might get into that. So email us those requests there. And hey, everybody, always support small business, support local. All right, everybody. I'm out of here. Tom Adul signing off for Winnipeg Alternative Media. This is and always will be your prairie fucking truth.
conspiracy. They call us fringe and loud, but we are just asking questions, standing up amongst the crowd. We see the vacant storefronts, the broken promises made, and we're reaching for the real stories before they all fade. From the north end to St. Boniface, the message starts to spread.